Welcome back to Paigeforge. So in our install video, I went over the fact that you can install Paigeforge in Antigravity. And in that video, I mentioned that I had the old school Antigravity before they made all of their updates, and that I couldn't confirm or deny whether or not the new Antigravity IDE would or would not work with Paigeforge. So I went ahead and I downloaded the brand new Antigravity IDE. Now this is important, and that's why I'm saying it multiple times. So before, what they are now calling Antigravity IDE was just Antigravity. That was just what Antigravity was. And then they came out with Antigravity 2.0. And when they did that, a lot of people got very angry and upset, myself included, because I had an absolute nightmare when they did this, to a point where I went through a lot to keep my old Antigravity before any of the updates. And what they did is what they are calling quote unquote regular Antigravity is actually what used to be, I think, called the manager view in Antigravity. And so main Antigravity is basically similar to the Codex app or Claude Code desktop. And it's loading up right now. And so it looks more like a regular chat interface, and that is the direction that they went in with that. So this is currently, the regular Antigravity. And you'll see in any of your projects that it will say Open IDE. So you have to have the IDE installed, obviously, in order to do that. And that was also a little bit tricky, is that you have to look for, so actually let me do a search, Antigravity IDE download. So that's what I would search for. And then the top one should be the actual IDE download. So that's what you want to see is IDE, and then download. It'll take you down here and you will download for whatever your machine is. And I'll put this in the getting started PDF as well. Okay. So this is the IDE, and it is thankfully still a VS Code fork. And that is what makes Paigeforge work or not work with the system. It has to be a VS Code fork. Or VS Code itself. So this would also work in Windsurf if you had Windsurf. Any of the code forks from VS Code that have extensions still enabled will work with Paigeforge. So again, if you'd come over to extensions, in order to install Paigeforge, you would install from VSIX the same way you would in VS Code. And the other thing that I wanted to draw attention to, and I believe that they do this on purpose, I cannot prove this, but in order to find the agents that we went over in the install, so Claude, Klein, Abacus, and Codex, you have to do a little bit more searching. Abacus comes right up with Abacus. It shows Abacus AI. There will not be a blue check mark, unfortunately, because they pull from the open marketplace instead of the approved VS Code marketplace that has the blue check marks. So it will ask you if you actually trust this thing. And basically, so this one, Abacus AI, this is the official version. So you can trust this. And then if I close this, if I type in Claude though, now this shows at the top because I have this installed. That's why it's showing at the top. But if I did not have this installed, this would be the first one that shows. And you would have to scroll and scroll and scroll in order to find the real Claude code. So you want to type in Claude code and potentially Claude code for VS Code by Anthropic. This is the one you want. Also, it shows different reviews. And I think, again, this is because this is the open VSX marketplace that is showing, not the official one. So it's just something to keep in mind. But you want Claude code for VS Code by Anthropic. Again, it'll ask you if you trust this extension. You will say yes. And then for Codex, similar thing. Now it's going to show at the top right here. But if it wasn't, this would show a whole bunch of Codex. So what I did was Codex Open AI, and then this one should be one of the top ones. And if you look, Codex OpenAI's coding agent, OpenAI 9 million, and this is the real Codex. So this is the one you would want for Codex. Klein was a little bit of a weird one for me because this Klein, I think, did show at the top. It doesn't say by Klein. It says by, I'm not going to try to pronounce this, but it shows by this person, which I had to do a lookup, but in the VS Code, that is actually the ID maker So the identifier right here, this is a match to the identifier in VS Code. So I wanted to confirm that. This is the official Cline. If it shows this and that many installs, and again, this is the identifier and this is the version. It was literally just updated. So this is the official version of Cline. And I think that covers it. Yes, Claude, Cline, Codex, good. So that covers the installation. Those are the ones that you're going to want to install. And again, if you don't use Cline or you don't use Abacus, there's no need for you to install that. This is just if you maybe have Gemini as a daily driver. For me, I use Gemini for quick stuff and like easy stuff. So I would be using Gemini for some quick sorting or some filing or things like that usually. But some of you guys use it as a daily driver for writing using the Pro models. That's completely up to you, obviously. And this is the easiest way to use Gemini as a chat with Paigeforge because there is not a VS Code extension for Gemini because they have Antigravity instead. So that's why I'm going over all of this, is if you have Gemini in addition to those other ones, then this is the best way for you to use Gemini as well as those other ones. So now we're going to go over how to set up your view to actually easily access those other agents because they don't want to make it easy on you because they want you to use Gemini. So by default, the right sidebar is always going to be Gemini, and it will just say agent. It doesn't even say Gemini, which I thought was a little bit interesting. Now you will see in the center pane that there is open Codex sidebar, open Claude Code, right? And then Cline is over here, which I personally dislike very strongly because I might want to be able to have my files open. I might want to be able to see my files, and I can't see the files and simultaneously talk to Cline. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to have all of your agents that you might be talking to on that right sidebar. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here, and this took me a ridiculous amount of time to play with because there is some finicky controls in other places. So we're going to go customize layout, and you will see we have menu bar, activity bar, which is this pane right here, which I do like this on, especially for Paigeforge. It's really quick and easy to go from files to Paigeforge. So that's the activity bar. Secondary activity bar, you'll see there's a crossout. This is hidden by default. Okay, and then we have primary sidebar, which is again where your files or the little opening window for Paigeforge is that you want to double click to have that primary sidebar hide. And then secondary sidebar is where Gemini agent is open right now. And then there's a bottom panel, and then there's a status bar. So this is the status bar. So if you use like any of the import or like copy to AI, it'll actually give you little instructions down here in the status bar, which is actually kind of nice. So I usually leave that on. The bottom panel is where you're going to find a terminal. You're going to find problems, output, debug. This is usually your coder place, the place where the devs live, right? And I am a dev, but I like to use Claude Code in terminal. You can use it in the extension. It's just a personal preference thing, really. And so I'm going to go over both because I use both. So what we are going to do first is we are going to click on the secondary activity bar. Boom! Now you can see Codex, Abacus, and Claude, as well as our default agent, which is Gemini, are all showing here as little shortcuts, which is great. And so I can close this now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my little Cline bot, and I'm going to drag my little Cline bot over here so that Cline is now in my right sidebar. Yay. Then I'm going to grab my terminal, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. Boom. And then I can close my bottom by clicking here. And now, if I want to if I want to call Claude, which is if you have Claude Code CLI, it will ask if I can trust this folder. Yes, you can. And then Claude Code is right here in my terminal, right in the same little sidebar that I talk to all of my other agents in. So that is just a really quick rundown that if you are using Gemini as a daily driver for certain tasks, it can also be kind of good for certain tasks like analytical tasks. The one thing I do want to just swing into this part as well is the fact that one of the reasons I don't use Gemini as a writing agent that a lot of people don't know about is Gemini watermarks every single output. What does that mean? There is a process of watermarking that can be done with AI agents where it is basically 100% detectable by Gemini's and Google's native detector, which is currently only available at like enterprise level. But as they roll that out more and more to researchers and to journalists and other things like that, that detector will be released more. So I don't personally love the idea of them trying to watermark my work, right? Now, I do want to say that you can remove any AI watermarking by extensive rewrites and extensive edits, sometimes even editing with just a different model will remove that watermark. But for me, I don't love the idea that that's there, and that if there are certain, paragraphs that I don't want touched, those paragraphs are going to come back from the detector saying that Gemini wrote this. And so for me, that's a hard no for me, just personally. But for some people, that's not an issue. Maybe you're just like automatically telling people that you're writing with AI and how you use it and where it's used. And that's great for you. That's totally fine. For me, I just don't love the fact that they're trying to do that. I get the reasoning why, but I don't love that. So just a little warning that I usually use Gemini for quick sorting tasks, filing, things like that, or maybe an analysis. I'm not going to really use Gemini in prose. And it's also for me a taste thing. I just personally don't really like the style of Gemini. Some people love it. It's totally a subjective thing. But I did want to go over how you can set it up, just like I did in VS Code, with where you can have things all pretty. Okay, I will see you in the next one.